Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. There were 3 mugs on the table. One was mine, one was hers, and the third, still warm, belonged to the woman my wife claimed she was helping all night. Clary sat across from me, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back, and a look on her face like she knew. It was quiet, almost polite. I offered her maple syrup. She passed me the butter. We were dancing around something unspeakable, like two strangers who knew they had both walked through the same fire but weren't ready to talk about the heat. Then the door opened. Marla stepped in, keys still swinging, face pale. I didn't say hello, didn't ask how the moving went. I just looked up and smiled. Done with him already? The words floated out of my mouth so smoothly I almost didn't recognize my own voice. It was the calmest I'd felt in weeks. But let me rewind, because you need to understand how we got here. It started with a lie dressed as routine. I'll be late. Helping Clary. Don't wait up. One text. That's all it took. But this wasn't just a late night. This was the 5th Clary emergency in 2 weeks. And the last one had ended with Marla coming home with a man's scent clinging to her like static. I'm not crazy. I notice things. I just pretend I don't. Because pretending is easier than admitting that your wife's affection now feels like theater. So I did something I'd never done in our entire 5-year marriage. I set an alarm for 4 a.m. I drove to Clary's apartment, parked across the street, watched as the lights stayed off, watched as no cars came. And then, just before sunrise, I knocked. She opened the door, wrapped in a blanket, mascara smudged, eyes puffy like she hadn't slept at all. She used me again, didn't she? That's when I invited her over for breakfast. Not out of pettiness, not even out of revenge. I just needed someone at the table to stop pretending. Clary didn't touch her eggs. She pushed them around with her fork like they might bite her back. I didn't push. I just watched her while the kettle hissed in the background and Marla's silence swirled in the air like smoke. You could hear the weight of everything unspoken pressing against the windows. Marla didn't sit down. She stood in the doorway like her legs were debating whether to run or collapse. Her eyes bounced between me and Clary, and I swear, for a split second, I saw the faintest twitch of guilt. But she didn't speak. Not even a fake apology. Just that stiff, twisted smile. The one she used on dinner guests and coworkers she hated. You told him? She finally said, low and sharp. Clary didn't flinch. I didn't have to. You're not very creative with your lies. That right there. That's when the tension snapped. Marla stepped in fully now, still not sitting, just pacing like a caged animal. So what? You two planned this little ambush. Eggs and betrayal? Real cute. No, I said, finally letting my voice rise. I just wanted to know why my wife kept disappearing every Thursday with the same excuse. And guess what? The sister you were supposedly helping was eating pancakes with me before the sun even came up. Marla's jaw tightened. She looked at me like I was the villain in some story she made up in her head. This is pathetic, she spat. You think what? That I'm cheating because I stay out a few nights? No, I said calmly. I think you're cheating because you smell like someone else when you come home. Because you text me fake schedules. Because your stories fall apart faster than your promises. Clary finally set her fork down. Marla, I didn't say anything earlier because I thought it wasn't my place. But dragging me into your lies? That's where I draw the line. Marla scoffed. You're just mad I didn't cover for you last year when you... Don't, Clary snapped. Don't deflect. I sat there, quiet, watching two sisters unravel years of tension across my breakfast table. It was surreal, like watching a play written by someone who hated happy endings. And then Marla dropped it. I've been seeing someone, she muttered, arms crossed. Not that it's any of your business anymore. My throat dried up instantly. Even though I already knew, hearing her say it, flat like that, without shame, it shattered something in me. Something I didn't even know was still whole. I figured, I said. That's why I packed your things last night. She blinked. That got her. You what? Closet. Suitcases. Everything you didn't hide too well. They're in the hallway. Thought I'd make breakfast while I waited to see if you'd lie to my face one last time. Marla didn't say a word. She just turned and walked toward the bedroom. Clary leaned over and whispered, You okay? No, I said honestly. But I will be. Because for the first time in months, the pretending was over. After Marla disappeared down the hallway, Clary and I sat in silence that wasn't peaceful. It was sharp. You could feel it cutting through everything that used to be stable. She didn't touch her coffee, and I didn't blink. My ears strained for any sound from the bedroom. A zipper. A drawer slamming. Nothing. Then I saw it. Her purse. Still sitting on the counter. Right beside the sugar bowl. Now listen, I'm not proud of what I did next. I know going through someone's bag isn't exactly honorable, but after months of feeling like a blindfolded idiot, honor was the last thing on my mind. I was desperate for clarity, for confirmation, for anything that made sense. Clary didn't say a word when I stood up and walked over. She just lowered her eyes, like she didn't want to be a witness to whatever came next. I opened the purse. It was like a time capsule of lies. The first thing I saw was a receipt. Dinner for two, last night, 9:17 p.m. Not some greasy takeout. Not a fast casual place where people go after moving furniture. This was a sleek, overpriced Italian restaurant with cloth napkins and candlelight. I knew it because I'd taken Marla there on our 3rd anniversary. She once said their tiramisu made her believe in God. The second thing was a business card, not hers. A man's. Fancy print. Bold font. Handwritten note on the back. Last night was perfect. Same time next week. I felt my teeth clench so hard my jaw popped. Clary looked up at me, eyes full of apology that didn't belong to her. You don't have to show me, she whispered. I shook my head. You deserve to know who your sister really is. I kept digging. Lipstick I'd never seen before. Room key from a boutique hotel across town. A small perfume bottle that smelled like betrayal and citrus. It was like a shrine to the double life she thought she could maintain forever. And then, her phone buzzed. Still inside her purse. Without thinking, I flipped it over. The screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize, Eli. No last name. Just Eli Redheart. A text preview hovered under the name. Hope your husband bought the story. Miss you already. I didn't need to read more. Marla re-entered the room right then, suitcase in hand, face unreadable. Her eyes flicked to her purse, then to me. She saw it open. She saw my expression. She knew. Anything else you want to dig through? She asked, voice flat, almost bored. No, I said, setting the purse down slowly. You already handed me enough pieces to build the full picture. She didn't apologize, didn't explain, just grabbed the purse, slung it over her shoulder, and looked at Clary. Enjoy your little breakfast summit, she muttered. Hope it was worth the drama. She walked out without slamming the door. Just a soft click. Like nothing ever happened. Like she hadn't just detonated the last 5 years of my life in front of her own sister. Clary reached over and placed her hand on mine, gently. I didn't know, she said. I swear I didn't know it was this bad. I know, I said. But I didn't look at her. I was staring at the door. I thought I'd feel relieved once she left. But the truth is, I didn't feel anything at all. Just empty. I don't remember how long I just sat there after the door closed behind her. My coffee had gone cold. The steam from the pancakes had vanished, and even Clary had quietly stepped away to give me space. The apartment felt heavier without Marla in it, which was ironic, considering the weight she'd been pressing into every corner for months. It should have felt like freedom, right? Like finally taking off tight shoes after a long walk. But it didn't. It felt like being dropped into silence after a bomb goes off. I didn't even cry. I just sat there, trying to piece together how I became this guy. The one who had to confirm his wife's affair through receipts, keycards, and some stranger named Eli. Clary came back a little while later with a glass of water and asked if I wanted to talk. I didn't. Not yet. I knew I owed her a conversation, maybe a thank you for not letting Marla spin another lie, but my head was spinning too fast. Everything felt like static. So I told her I needed some air. She nodded. No judgment. She always had that quiet understanding in her eyes that Marla lacked. Even before this mess. I went for a walk. Just a few blocks. The same loop I always did when anxiety clawed at my chest. But this time I didn't notice the usual things. The guy yelling at squirrels, the smell of burnt toast from the bakery on 8th. I just kept replaying the message on Marla's phone in my head. Hope your husband bought the story. He wasn't even worried about me. That stung more than I expected. I wasn't a threat. I was just some clueless background character in their little romantic subplot. When I finally walked back into the apartment, Clary had cleaned up breakfast. The dishes were stacked neatly. The counters wiped. There was something painfully gentle about that, like she was trying to stitch the wound her sister left behind, one small act at a time. I opened my mouth to thank her, but that's when the doorbell rang. We both froze. Clary looked at me. Are you expecting anyone? I shook my head. My stomach turned. We walked to the door slowly, like people approaching a cliff. I opened it, and there he was. I didn't know his face, but I knew who he was the moment I saw him. Tall, designer jacket, confident, but fidgeting, maybe in his mid-30s. Hairstyled like he paid someone too much for it. And in his hand, Marla's pink duffel bag. He blinked like he was surprised to see me. Like maybe he expected her to answer. Maybe he didn't even know she was married. Is Marla here?" he asked. I didn't respond. I just stared. He shifted uncomfortably. "She left this at my place last night. Said she needed to grab it before her husband got home." He trailed off as he realized. Too late. I tilted my head. "So you're Eli." He looked like someone had slapped him. Wait. You're. Yeah, I said. I'm the husband she was talking about. Clary appeared behind me then. Her jaw dropped when she saw him. "Oh my God. Eli," she whispered. "You're Eli?" He turned pale. "You know him?" I asked, confused. Clary looked from me to him, and her lips parted like she wanted to explain, but no sound came out. Eli stepped back. "I think I made a mistake coming here." I took the duffel bag from his hand and said nothing, just closed the door in his face. Then I turned to Clary, and that's when she finally confessed something I didn't see coming at all. I stood there with the duffel bag in my hands, still warm from Eli's grip, and everything around me felt slightly tilted, like reality had shifted a few degrees off-center. Clary hadn't moved. She was still standing a few feet behind me, arms crossed, eyes locked on the door like she wanted to rewind time and slam it before he ever showed up. But it was too late for that. "You know him," I said again. Not a question anymore, just a quiet accusation, like I was confirming my own unraveling. Clary swallowed hard. "I didn't know he was that Eli. Not until I saw his face." "But you know him." She nodded, slow and reluctant, like each movement cost her something. "I met him months ago, at a client event. He was charming, too charming. The kind of guy who always has a story, always buys the next drink. I didn't like him. He hit on me a few times, even after I told him I wasn't interested." I let out a bitter laugh. "So naturally, Marla ended up in his bed." Clary winced. I never connected the dots. I didn't know she was seeing someone, let alone him. "If I'd known," she trailed off, her voice cracking in that way people try to hide. "If I'd known, I would have told you." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I couldn't shake the feeling that everyone around me had been living in a different movie while I was stuck watching a rerun of a life that wasn't even mine anymore. I dropped the duffel bag on the floor and sat down on the arm of the couch, feeling more like a guest in my own home than I ever had before. Clary sat across from me, knees pulled up under her, fingers nervously tracing the seam of the cushion. "There's more," she said after a long pause. Of course there was. She looked straight at me now, her voice steadier than I expected. "Marla told me something about a month ago. I didn't take it seriously at the time. I thought she was just venting. You two had been arguing more, and she said something like, 'If he keeps acting like a lost puppy, I'll just find someone who knows how to bite.'" I blinked. "She said that?" Clary nodded. And I laughed. I laughed like it was a joke. But it wasn't, was it? No, it wasn't. And the worst part? I remembered the night she said that. We'd fought over something stupid. Groceries or bills or some dumb comment I made about her phone always lighting up at dinner. She'd rolled her eyes, gone into the bedroom, and locked the door. I slept on the couch that night, too ashamed to even knock. I sat there now, hands buried in my lap, wondering how many moments like that I had rewritten in my head just to avoid admitting what was obvious to everyone else. Clary stood up and walked to the duffel bag. She opened it, not to snoop, but to make a point. "You deserve to see who she really is. No more illusions." Inside were things that didn't belong in a married woman's bag. Lingerie with tags still on them. A bottle of champagne. A second phone. That stopped everything. A second phone. She handed it to me slowly, as if touching it too fast might make it explode. I stared at it. Locked, of course, but just seeing it there was enough. She had a whole world I didn't know about. A backup life. One with a different name, probably. A different voice. A version of herself I was never allowed to meet. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat back down and whispered, "I don't think I know her at all." And Clary said, "Maybe you never did." I didn't open the second phone right away. I couldn't. Just holding it felt like betrayal in my palm, sleek, cold, vibrating with things I wasn't meant to see. But the weight of it, that was heavier than anything I'd felt since this whole nightmare started. It was small enough to fit in a purse, but powerful enough to collapse a marriage. Clary sat quietly across from me, her eyes flicking between the phone and my face like she was bracing for an explosion. I didn't say anything. I just stood, walked into the bedroom, and shut the door. I needed space. I needed to breathe. I needed to prepare myself for what I already knew deep down, that this thing held everything I'd been too naive, too loyal, or maybe just too afraid to see. I stared at the screen. No passcode prompt. Just a swipe up. Weird. I unlocked it. No wallpaper. Just a gray screen. No notifications. No apps on the main screen. Just empty. I opened the gallery. Nothing. I checked texts. Nothing. Even the call log was blank. And for a split second, I actually felt relief. Like maybe this was a decoy. A burner phone she kept for emergencies or for work or, I don't know, some innocent explanation. I was desperate for something innocent. But then I swiped down from the top, and there it was, private mode, on. I tapped it. It asked for a PIN. I tried our wedding anniversary. Wrong. Her birthday. Wrong. My birthday. Still wrong. I stood there, heart pounding, staring at a screen that now felt like a locked vault. I sat on the bed, trying to think. What password would she use for something like this? What number meant something to her, but not to me? Then it hit me. I remembered a conversation from years ago, back when things were still soft and warm between us. We'd been talking about first loves, and she'd said something odd. Everyone remembers their first apartment code more than their first kiss. I'd laughed it off at the time. I tried the 4-digit code she said she'd used back then, 1-9-9-2. It worked. Private mode off. The phone bloomed to life. The hidden gallery had over 100 photos. The messaging app, one I didn't even recognize, was filled with threads. Most of the names were saved as emojis or initials. There was no Eli here. No full names. Just lies, tucked behind locked screens and generic usernames. I clicked on one thread. A message from her. You left a bruise. I had to cover it up before he noticed smirking face. A reply. You're lucky I held back. Next time I won't. I felt my stomach turn. Not from jealousy. From disgust. From the realization that Marla wasn't just cheating. She was playing a role. Acting in some twisted fantasy she built behind my back. The photos were worse. Hotels. Dinners. Some too intimate to describe. Nothing explicit, but enough to scorch the back of my eyes. Her hand holding someone else's. Her face in candlelight I didn't light. Her smile, the one I hadn't seen in months, directed at someone who didn't deserve it either. I scrolled faster, my thumb trembling. Then I froze. A photo from 2 weeks ago. My birthday. She'd told me she had a work dinner. That she'd make it up to me on the weekend. The picture showed her in the same dress she left the house in that night, clinking glasses with a man I didn't recognize at a rooftop bar I'd never been to. She looked happy, relaxed, like I didn't exist. That crushed me. Not the cheating, not even the lying, but the fact that I was so forgettable. A background detail in her real life. I put the phone down and stared at the wall, barely blinking. My whole world had been rearranged in 10 minutes. The version of her I loved, the one who cried during Pixar movies and laughed at my dumb jokes, she was gone. Maybe she'd never existed. And I realized something then. Something sharp and quiet and final. I wasn't broken. I was done. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the edge of the bed with that second phone in my hand, my thoughts spiraling like water circling a drain. I must have read those messages 100 times, trying to figure out when exactly she stopped seeing me as her husband and started treating me like a cover story. The worst part wasn't the photos or the texts or even the bruises left by some guy who held back. It was the realization that she never once thought I'd find out, that she counted on me being too soft, too loyal, too small to matter. At around 6:15 in the morning, I heard the front door open. I didn't move. I heard the familiar click of her heels on the floor, the way she always walked in after a night out. Calm, slow, already rehearsing her excuse in her head. The door to the bedroom creaked open. She stopped in the doorway when she saw me sitting there, still wearing yesterday's clothes, holding her second life in my hand. She blinked. Did you go through my stuff? I didn't say anything right away. I just held up the phone. Her eyes narrowed. Then, to my absolute disbelief, she smiled. Not a guilty smile. Not embarrassed or ashamed. It was the kind of smirk people give when they've been waiting to be caught just to see how far they can twist the knife. Wow, she said. I really thought you'd never figure it out. Yeah, I said quietly. I thought the same thing. She walked into the room, sat down in the chair across from me like this was some casual debrief, and crossed her legs. So, what do you want to do now? Cry? Scream? Burn my stuff? I stared at her, stunned. You're not even going to try to explain? Explain what? That I got bored? That living with someone who shuts down every time life gets hard isn't exactly thrilling? She shrugged. You stopped being a partner. You started being a shadow. My jaw tightened. So, instead of talking to me, you made a second phone and played house with every man who gave you attention? She laughed, actually laughed. Oh, come on. Don't act so shocked. You never really looked at me anymore. You looked past me. You were too busy walking on eggshells to notice I was already gone. That was the moment something snapped in me, but not in the way she probably expected. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood up, slowly, and placed the phone on the nightstand. You know what the worst part is? I said, it's not that you cheated. It's not even that you lied. It's that you waited for me to find out. You wanted me to see it. You didn't just betray me. You made it a performance. She leaned back, arms folded, still smirking. Maybe I wanted a reaction. Something real. You used to be fire, Miles. Now you're just fog. I nodded slowly. Thanks. That's all I needed to hear. She looked confused. Wait, what does that mean? I didn't answer. I walked past her, out of the bedroom, grabbed the small suitcase I'd packed after midnight, and rolled it to the door. Clary was sitting on the couch, eyes red and puffy. She didn't ask where I was going. She just stood and handed me an envelope, my passport, some cash, and a folded note. She must have seen this coming before I did. Marla stood in the hallway now, watching me with one eyebrow raised. What are you doing? I'm leaving. For how long? I met her eyes, steady for once. Forever. And with that, I walked out. No screaming. No grand scene. Just the quiet sound of a man who finally decided he was worth more than crumbs. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a hotel booked, a couch lined up, or even a proper change of clothes. All I had was that suitcase, the envelope Clary pressed into my hand, and the decision that I couldn't stay in that house, with those memories, for one more minute. But you'd be surprised what happens the moment you finally choose yourself. I spent the first few nights in a cheap motel 2 towns over. The walls were thin, the bed creaked, and the heater sounded like it was coughing up gravel. But I slept better there than I had in months. No lies in the next room. No second phone buzzing with secrets. Just silence, real silence. And for once, it didn't feel empty. It felt like peace. Clary checked in with me every day. She apologized again for not putting things together sooner, but honestly, she didn't know me that. If anything, she reminded me what empathy looks like. Her support, quiet, consistent, meant more than she probably realized. A week later, I got a call from a small consulting firm I'd interviewed with months before Marla's betrayal blew up. I'd forgotten I even applied. They wanted to bring me in for a second meeting. I almost declined, thinking I wasn't ready, but then I remembered her words. You used to be fire. Now you're just fog. So I showed up. In a shirt I ironed myself, with hands still shaking a little, but I showed up. And I got the job. Things started turning after that. Not in a dramatic movie montage way, but slowly. I found an apartment with squeaky floors and terrible parking, but it was mine. I started cooking again. I even adopted a rescue dog named Nelson who barks at his own reflection and steals my socks. And somehow, that ridiculous dog helped patch something inside me. A few weeks ago, I bumped into Clary at the farmer's market. She looked happier, freer. We got coffee, talked for hours. Nothing romantic, just honest, raw conversation. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel broken. I felt rebuilt. By leaving quietly, I gave myself space to breathe. To see that I was never the weak one in the story. Just the one who loved too deeply, trusted too fully, and finally had enough courage to walk away. And Marla? She sent a few messages. Apologies wrapped in manipulation. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Some people only understand your value when they no longer have access to it. And that's exactly how it should stay. If you've made it this far, thank you. Comment below and tell us. What's one moment in history, personal or global, where someone walked away and everything changed for the better? Let's share the turning points that made us stronger. You're watching Reddit Confessions, where stories end not in tears, but in growth. And if you're still holding on to someone who doesn't see your worth, maybe this is your sign. Choose yourself. Every time.